HVAC 360 is brought to you today by ASHRAE's Future Guidelines Committee. Unless you live under a bridge, you've heard of Guideline Zero for building commissioning and our Net Zero Energy Design Guidelines. But today, we introduce our newest Zero project, Guideline Zero G. This guideline covers low and no gravity design best practices. Don't think the ceiling is a good place for a thermostat? Think again. Are you factoring in solar flares into your design? You better. Learn all the ins and outs of designing in Zero G with hundreds of graphs, charts, words, and stick figure drawings. Guideline Zero G. The future is closer than you think. Hey, what's up? Welcome back. This is episode number 99, one away from 100. Matt Nelson here, your host for HVAC 360, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. How do we do that? We do that by sharing lessons learned from actual field experience and by talking with industry experts, but we don't stop there. If you want to go over and jump on the mailing list, go over to HVAC360.com and join the growing community of people just like you. So what's up for this week? This week, we're going to be talking with Pierre Lafarge, co-founder of Sparkfund, a company who is getting owners to think about a new way to get projects done, the subscription model. This is the first time that I've heard of this model used, and I think as a professional, you really need to be aware of all the different options that your client might be able to entertain to get his project done. So I think without any further ado, let's just cut to the tape and talk with Pierre. All right, today we're going to be talking with Pierre Lafarge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sparkfund. How are you doing today, Pierre?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Not a problem. Hey, so I found out about this Sparkfund a little bit ago. Can you tell me a little bit about, its origin story, where the idea came from, and who you are?
Sure. So I was originally a consultant working for a company here in D.C. and actually working for customers, helping them get access to building equipment and systems. And what I realized was that they were having a lot of trouble sorting through a network of different vendors for different technologies, right? What they really wanted were kind of simple outcomes, light and cold air, warm air in their space. And the process of navigating the entire landscape, particularly across technologies, was frustrating for them. So I thought there might be a solution to that, and ultimately set out to build a platform that could bring them ultimately what we now offer as a subscription to building infrastructure that moves across technologies and delivers those outcomes: cold air, warm air, light, and other functions. We do EV charging, EV vehicles. Really as a service, and guarantees that outcome and meaningfully reduces the cost that a customer needs to pay over a term to get those outcomes compared to ownership.
So I guess when a lot of people, including myself, when we take a look at Sparkfund as a company, our first reaction is to think, how is this different from what what they call an ESCO, an energy services company?
Sure.
So how do you compare that?
Yeah, so obviously, there is certainly at a categorical level, energy service companies, particularly the large ones through performance contracting, have done something broadly similar. With performance contracting, you're guaranteeing the performance of an asset, often around savings, and you're doing it often for large projects and particularly in the municipal and federal space. And I think that there's a separate conversation about how the vehicle that is performance contracting has changed and evolved and adapted into the current market. But it's safe to say that it's primarily focused on municipal and federal customers and on very large centralized assets, central plants and things like that. And certainly has application in other places. But what Sparkfund is bringing to the market is really designed to be much more fragmented, distributed, and working with customers with hundreds or even thousands of locations who have building infrastructure, that really is at the scale of hundreds of thousands or a few $1,000,000 per location, rather than requiring that centralization. Separately, performance contracting and its other equivalents like ESAs really are focused on savings. They're what I would describe, tools to finance efficiency. Subscription is really about accessing the outcome of infrastructure. We're not guaranteeing savings. Instead, we provide a guarantee of the function of the equipment that we put in a building. So I'll leave it there, and if you have any questions, but I can say a little bit more.
Okay. So I guess, is this a brand new idea, or has it been tried before, or what?
So to give you a sense of how we arrived at subscription as a good fit, particularly for the commercial industrial sector customers to get access to infrastructure in a new way, we really identified that customers have three key pain points, or categories of pain points in this category. Time, the hassle of selecting multiple vendors across multiple technologies and coordinating the installations. Capital, finding the upfront capital expenditure to both make any sort of retrofit or upgrade, but also replace assets like HVAC at its end of life. We'll talk more about that later. And then also risk, right? What if they don't get the best deal? What if it's the wrong system for their site? And do they have to maintain it and provide kind of maintenance dollars and risk over time? So with those three categories, time, capital, and risk, what we've set out to do is create one simple pitch, right? That subscription for infrastructure can get you the outcomes that you want: cold air, warm air, light, with far fewer dollars over, say, a 5 or 10 year period than you would actually pay to own it, and with a much lower amount of pain in those areas: time, capital, and risk.
So I think a lot of people have been, familiar with, or getting more and more familiar with, a subscription model, kind of like software as a service. So this is actually kind of more of a building systems as a service.
Yeah, and one of the basic questions we ask customers, and kind of common sense: why do you own your HVAC? Well, you want cold air, you want warm air, you need a boiler and chiller, but you don't really need to own it. You need to have those outcomes. And I think a really interesting equivalent that's changing another category is in cloud computing. Amazon Web Services, their business is actually, I think, based on almost exactly the same premise, that customers no longer want to spend the time to figure out which servers to own, right? People used to have server closets and their own IT teams, and they would own and take the risk of and put capital towards and take the time to figure out the best way for their company to access storage and computing. Now they access it through the cloud, and AWS provides it as a subscription, as a service, and they've reduced the cost significantly by centralizing all of that activity.
So, and I guess you would think, people out there can, rent space, and they would have like a landlord that would take care of their equipment, and basically they're kind of getting the same thing where you have, I'm guaranteed power, I'm guaranteed, lighting, heating, cooling, but this is more for people who own their buildings, who own their systems, and this is a way to kind of get away from owning that portion of it. Is that right?
That's right. Although we actually work more and more with the landlords themselves, who, as they're building, properties and managing them, often having to purchase those systems on their tenants' behalf, again in that split incentive. The landlord doesn't want to necessarily own the HVAC on their tenants' behalf either. So we have some of our largest customers and deployments are actually managing the infrastructure for REITs and real estate groups who want to provide the best infrastructure they can, that's most reliable, efficient, and with guaranteed function, while focusing on their core business, which is building great buildings. So we have a pretty even mix between folks who own their building using subscription to access infrastructure and folks who are leasing space.
Now, how would you, describe? I mean, if you take me through the process from the owner's perspective, how do they start off with Sparkfund?
So, in our conversations, first of all, Sparkfund is not actually another interesting piece of our go-to-market strategy. Is we're not trying to be our own brand. We don't want to go directly to the customers, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, you never heard of us, but we'd love to sell you subscription infrastructure." We don't think that customers are looking for more vendors. Again, my experience that side of the table really showed me that that's actually the opposite of what customers want. They really want to work with their trusted energy brands. So we go alongside trusted, what we call providers. So those are sometimes utilities, competitive providers of power and gas, and even large energy and service companies, including some HVAC. And those companies have real deep relationships with these customers in their territories. And the customers are actually asking them in many cases, look, you provide me the grid as a service, right? I get a kilowatt hour, or you provide me gas, or you're currently selling me HVAC as cash. Could you just provide this as a subscription so I don't have to really worry about it? I don't want to look elsewhere for a vendor. I want to get all this stuff upgraded, or when it meets end of life, I want to have a real strategy to continue to have cold air, but without having to spend a huge amount of money. And I don't want to take the risk of worrying about owning it, right? I want you to specialize in that. So Sparkfund is actually an enabling platform that trusted energy brands can use to bring subscription to the infrastructure to their customers.
So I guess what are the other? If I'm a energy brand that has a bunch of customers, what makes me select Sparkfund over, say, I don't know, maybe PACE financing or other different commodities out there?
Yeah, it's a really simple answer. I mean, in some ways, the outcome of financing is that you don't need capital up front, right? But you still have to select the vendor, the technology, and when you finance it, you still own it. Financing is a way to purchase technology. And the difference is subscription bundles all of that together. You use a trusted energy brand in a subscription context to tell you what the best type of system is and where the opportunity is. And again, we own it on the customer's behalf, but we provide it as a service at our risk. If the function that we're guaranteeing isn't provided, the customer pays us nothing. Right? There's no minimum payment, unlike a loan or a lease.
Right. So you have the guaranteed function. So I guess when you're partnering up with these trusted energy brands, who's providing the function, or who's guaranteeing the function? I mean, obviously, do they go out there and fix the equipment kind of on your behalf as part of this partnership?
Yeah. So one of the reasons we talk about Sparkfund as a platform, or actually even an operating system, is we take each of the pieces of this complicated market that are required to offer subscription infrastructure to customers. And that's, again, the provider who has the relationship, the vendor who knows how to select the system, do the assessment, turn the wrenches, and actually install it. And also the capital providers who are willing to help us own that asset on the customer's behalf. So what you're describing, who actually does the work and who takes the risk on an ongoing basis, well, those are the vendors, the current HVAC, lighting, and other companies that are out there doing good work in their regions today or nationally. And we actually then give them an ongoing annuity for that work. We pay them up front as a cash customer, or we become their cash customer, and then pay them over time for the service.
All right. So essentially, I guess you kind of hold the maintenance contract with that provider to maintain the equipment.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. So I guess does this vary any differently from say an energy services project as far as from actually getting implemented?
Yeah, in terms of an energy services project, like in a performance contract standpoint, or like an ESA, in which specific context?
Right. I just, once you get into the, hey, we're going to provide this for you, the construction looks the same from the owner's standpoint. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. Right. The terms are very different up front of subscription compared to a performance contract or an ESA, but which we've discussed. But other than that, yeah, we essentially act as a light kind of GC and review layer to make sure that it's the right equipment, it's the right price, and then it's delivered on a subcontracted basis to the customer.
Now, as far as the working with these energy providers, obviously there's multiple systems that you talk about, owning on behalf of the building owner. Where do you, I mean, as far as the negotiations between, because I mean, typically the energy service provider, they're going to have a pretty good handle on what they've typically put in. Is that going to be a different recommendation than what you have, or is this a conversation that you're going to have saying, hey, you know what? We've had a bunch of these installations, and you can give them better advice to kind of make better choices for their options.
Yeah, definitely. We really work closely with our vendors, and we actually end up, as we bring them onto the platform, essentially are trying to pick the ones that we think are the best in a given area or a given technology, and we think they know what they're doing. So we make sure that that's the right vendor up front. But once that's the vendor, then that's absolutely their discretion of how to design the system and how to bring the best system to the customer. We don't have that in-house.
So I guess what is the I mean, as far as the implementation, where is it being implemented? Is it in the U.S.? Is it strictly in the U.S.? Is it in other countries? How is this going to market?
Yeah, we've done projects in 46 states, and we are now doing our first installations in Canada and Europe with a major Fortune 200 corporate customer of ours in those places. So just expanding into those other countries.
So I guess what sort of feedback are you getting from these installations?
Yeah, a big part of I think the value we can bring to a customer is across technologies with a really simple technology subscription, right? So 4-page contract. Every technology type is another addendum of 1 or 2 pages. So they really have a simple vehicle that they review up front. We're actually engaging that customer not on a given project at first. We're actually just talking about subscription versus ownership, and asking them again, why do you want to own your air conditioner? You want cold air, and once they engage with that structure and sign the subscription, then we have a really great opportunity to send out again those partners into the field to review the opportunities that are in the buildings, to do audits, and to come back with a bunch of recommendations about what sort of technologies and what sort of opportunities there are. But from the customer standpoint, it's really just one conversation, right? They can use Sparkfund, and again, often on behalf of a utility or power provider, sort of like an offering powered by Sparkfund. They have one centralized way to look at all these offerings and a contract they already have reviewed and understood. So it's not a lot of distinct offers, which often fail just because they don't have time to review them all. Again, they've decided to subscribe. So the installations have gone really well. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of work to actually put in equipment into buildings, as your listeners know better than I do. But it's always, we found plenty of the challenges of project management and installation and timing and delivery and materials and change orders. But I think that having that central point of communication and customer experience, we've gotten some really positive feedback from customers about how much value that's added compared to how they were doing it in the past, spending their own time, capital, and risk across many conversations.
So, I guess just to be clear, it's still they don't own the equipment, but they're still paying the energy bills. Is that correct?
That's right. And one other point in terms of how the installations and rollouts going, as we are now several customers into kind of the later stages of programmatic rollouts, where we've done dozens of locations. What's been really interesting to see is that Sparkfund's platform and the subscription offer has allowed them in some cases to double, triple, or even 10x how fast they can move through their portfolio. So previously, one customer, which is a really interesting manager of healthcare and assisted living facilities in the Southeast, they have 100 locations, and they were doing about 2 a year previously, and just with lighting. In the last 2 quarters, we've done 20 locations and are moving into a bunch of different technologies. So that acceleration of a CFO or an energy manager's goal in this category, with, again, far less time and no capital and a lot less risk, is a really big part of the value proposition of subscription.
Now, do you find that some of the clients that use this platform are actually paying for the subscription with energy savings?
We do. I mean, there are plenty of projects, particularly lighting, that generate great savings. And of course, excuse me. Of course, we, can estimate and show the customer how much they think they might save. Right? Savings is a pretty simple formula, right? How much does the kilowatt hour cost? How many hours are you going to use it? And what is the nameplate difference of this machine versus the last one? A little more complicated in HVAC, certainly. But as your listeners know, in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and a broader category, particularly for full retrofits of the systems, this is really not a savings industry. And Sparkfund's not an efficiency company. We are an infrastructure company. And as again, I think you and many of your listeners probably know, a lot of these systems are reaching end of life. Right? There's a lot of baling wire and duct tape going into the HVAC in the United States. It was installed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and a lot of it needs to be fully replaced. And not just a reasonable payback VFD add-on. It's actually time to do the whole thing. And when that sort of infrastructure challenge comes up, subscription with a guaranteed function that's not related to savings is a really good option to get the outcome you want, upgrade your infrastructure when it meets its end of life, and do so for a whole lot less money over time rather than owning it yourself.
Now, I guess there's a hard, when I'm thinking of this, I'm trying to think in terms of what I know ESCOs do, which is kind of, okay, we're gonna do a project, we're gonna take lighting, like you said, as a good payback. We're gonna pair it with something that doesn't have a great payback, and we'll get a kind of a medium payback, but it always have that time, time requirement of say 15 years or what have you. So a minimum payback period. What's sort of the, I mean, it's I guess it's one thing. I'm trying to figure out if there's how the contract reads. I guess you would, if say an owner goes, hey, you know what, I don't like the service for whatever reason. Do they end up buying it back? I'm trying to get, how does that, is there, because since it's an ongoing thing and you're not paying for 15 years, it's like you're paying for the life of the equipment. How that clause has to work. I mean, it's not like you're going to go and, repo their HVAC system and they're going to have to, install a new one. So how does that work for a customer?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And two points of clarification. Our contracts do have clear terms, right? So 5, 7, 10 years. And the end of that term, either you extend, you upgrade to a new system, or you cancel. And if you cancel, if there's any remaining value of the equipment, there's a clear schedule about how much it costs to purchase it, and that's not with any fees or accelerated payment. It's just the underlying depreciated value of the hardware. So our contracts, again, super simple, 4 pages, extremely transparent, and you have that certainty of in any month of that contract. If you want to purchase it, if you sell your building and the owner wants to buy the equipment rather than take over the subscription, there's a clear cost there. That's kind of a very simple underlying cost of the equipment as if you bought it with cash up front.
Oh, okay.
We have not seen that happen. When customers move to subscription. It's typically a real realization of, gosh, I was spending all this time and money worrying about owning my air conditioning when all I wanted was cold air. And now I can focus on my core business and what I actually care about in meeting my goals.
Okay. Well, and that actually, solves my follow-up question, which would be, what happens when you get a system that, is at end of life again? So you've kind of
simple upgrade.
Yeah. So you've timed the upgrade with the cycle.
Sure.
So I guess
we're seeing a lot of end of life issues around HVAC in the market, right? I mean, there are just a lot of customers out there. They've been doing some lighting and they've been doing controls and maybe some VFDs and they've been seeing good savings. That's the efficiency market. But as they start to see this real looming infrastructure challenge in their buildings, they don't yet have plans on how they're going to meet that end of life challenge. And I think that subscription is again, we're really both building our own version of subscription, and the broader concept really fits well with, I think, the next wave of infrastructure end-of-life replacement, particularly in HVAC in the United States.
Excellent. And just to I guess clarify, we've talked about lighting and HVAC. I know another couple pain points for owners is like windows and roofs. Is that also something that you cover?
It's not, because subscription in our case, and particularly with the way that the accounting for subscription works, really needs to be on active assets, right? They need to be controllable, they need to be active and measurable, and it's hard to guarantee the function of something that's passive, right? You can't say I've given you a new roof and I guarantee you it'll keep roofing. Windows keep windowing. The accounting codes just don't allow for that sort of passive pieces of building component to be delivered as a subscription.
Okay. Well, at least
again, a true subscription for an HVAC or lighting is actually counted as an operating expense, deductible off of the customer's taxes. It's not on their balance sheet as a loan. There's a lot of really clear benefits to a true subscription. It's like paying someone to mow your lawn, right? If they don't show up and mow your lawn, what are you going to do? You don't pay them.
Right.
Same thing with a true subscription, right? If the HVAC doesn't meet the exact nameplate standards and functions that are guaranteed, you don't have to pay.
Okay. And I guess that's simple enough that, in fact, the owners get to narrow their focus. So they just have to worry about the roof or the windows or what have you, instead of the entire.
And construction loans and PACE financing. There are a lot of really great products out there. From the very simple, construction financing and mortgages to PACE financing, which is more tailored to efficiency. There's some great products for long-term kind of heavy building components. But for the active energy infrastructure inside your building, we think subscription is really going to echo the trend that we've seen with servers, IT, copiers, a bunch of other categories, into that sort of outsourced ownership and subscription.
So I guess just the last couple of questions. When people are interested, some energy services companies, some energy providers, are you going out and selecting those, or are you soliciting those, or are they coming to you? How is that? If anybody's out there listening, how would they go about, getting involved with Sparkfund?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think that most of the folks that we work with as providers, again, they have relationships with customers that they think that this infrastructure and subscription pitch would be really resonant to. So if you have customers who have real challenges with end of life in their equipment and are looking for a strategy or to develop a strategy about how they're going to tackle it, that's something that we can really help vendors with, and to make sure that they retain those customers and expand their ability to add value to those customers in that new challenge. So that's one way people can engage as a provider and bring those customers the idea of subscription powered by Sparkfund. And we do that in the brand of that provider. And again, their brand powered by Sparkfund. And then the other way is as a service provider or vendor on the platform. If they, we're always looking for more support to do the kind of mounting load of projects that we have to do all around the country, and need best-in-class vendors who have great prices and experience rolling trucks, turning wrenches, and putting real equipment in buildings.
So as far as a size range of projects that you deal with, what would that be?
Individual buildings for us right now, if it's kind of the best way to think about it from a kind of a project standpoint, are anywhere from 100,000 to 10 million in terms of our current active projects actively ongoing. So it's a pretty big mix. Often the smaller projects are on the lighting side. Often the ones above a couple $1 million are on the HVAC side, or we do backup generation, again, EV infrastructure. It's a pretty broad range.
And anybody who wanted to learn more about Sparkfund, where would they go?
They can go to www.sparkfund.com and check us out.
All right, excellent. Any final words that we didn't cover here, Pierre?
No, thanks for having me on. And again, one of the great pleasures of my own experience going from a consultant on the customer side into building sort of platform has actually been getting to interact with folks in the HVAC industry. This industry has been here for a lot of years, really delivering for its customers and fighting a lot of customer demands and really making cold air and warm air happen. So it's an industry I have a lot of respect for and have enjoyed the kind of relationships we've built in it to date. So appreciate the work your listeners are doing, and looking forward to meeting them out in the field.
All right. Thanks again to Pierre Lafarge for taking the time to chat with us. Check out the show notes, some of the things that he mentioned during the interview. I'll list the Sparkfund website in there. Those show notes can be found at hvac360.com/99. Really, as a comment on the whole interview, I think it's great that owners have this option of being able to subscribe and kind of use their operating budget to provide comfort, in a sense, provide lighting, provide the right temperature. For some, it's not for everybody, but for those people that really need it, that really want it, that really want to get down to business and don't want to be bogged down by those functional aspects of their building. They just want comfort, and that's it. I think it's a great solution for them, and I'd be interested to talking with any of the actual people who run those buildings to actually get their feedback on how it has been for them. So again, it's just something that I've never personally had an experience with, but it was a new idea that I think I definitely wanted to share with you, my listening audience. So that's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I hope it was helpful. Go ahead and spread the word if you can. Sign up for the community at hvac360.com. And if you really want, go ahead and a 5-star rating, and I'll give you a shout out at the show if you do that for me on iTunes. So I'd really greatly appreciate it. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of HVAC 360. I'm Matt Nelson, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. And as always, know what you build and share what you know.